continue to delve into some of those other top stories, of course, that keep South Africans talking, because a 12-year-old has since appeared before the Brakpan Magistrates Court in Gauteng's East Rand. And these on charges of culpable homicide as well as driving without a license. A 14-year-old died after being hit by a vehicle that was allegedly being driven by the minor at the weekend. The 12-year-old was accompanied to court by his guardian and has since been released into the custody of his parents. But perhaps for more on this, we're going to be joined by Dr Omar Shaheda from the TDB Clinic. Joins us to unpack, give us a sense of how such cases are rare, but also how they're going to be handled, the legalities involved as well, and protection of rights at large. Let's have this conversation with Dr Omar happening via telephone at this point. If you can hear me, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. It's a tragic story that's obviously emerging from Brakpan, Doctor, and it involves a minor. And perhaps you could speak to the sensitivity of such cases, how they are handled. I mean, we understand that the 12-year-old who was accused, of course, was taken into custody, released into the custody of his parents. Give us a sense of that process.
Okay, so I think what we need to understand that children that come into conflict with the law fall under the Child Justice Act. And, of course, the Children's Act is applicable to children. And as you've said rightfully, this is a minor. So if the child falls under the Child Justice Act, as has been demonstrated that the child has been placed in the custody of the parents, with the Child Justice Act, they actually look at keeping children out of the criminal justice system to give children a second chance in life. So basically diverting them away from the potential arrest, incarceration, and going through brutal interrogation by police. And in this case, we know it's a 12-year-old, and the age of criminal capacity, the Child Justice Act looks at the age of criminal capacity, which means that one has to prove that the child has reasonable maturity to distinguish between right and wrong. And if one can prove that the child has criminal capacity, obviously the child would then enter the criminal justice system. However, with the Child Justice Act, children between the ages of 12 and 15, the presiding officers in the courts are quite lax, looking at how they can provide intervention, rehabilitation, and reintegration into the community. And there are certain risk indicators that one would look at in relation to the severity of the act. So firstly, looking at the pattern of duration of the behavior, severity of the behavior. And as we know in this case, it's a minor, it's a once-off incident. It wasn't something that was, the intention was not willfully to kill another child. So one needs to contextualize everything and look at what is in the best interest of the child. Because in the Children's Act, that is what we look at, promoting the best interest of the child, and the Child Justice Act looks at other opportunities of keeping the child out of the criminal justice system.
Sure. Dr. Shaheda, thank you for succinctly unpacking that for us. Few questions come to the fore. Perhaps we could, to your point, just speak about ascertaining, the child's criminal capacity. That is yet to be determined. But also because the incident happened on Friday the 7th. He was detained, but only released into his parents' custody on Sunday the 8th. We're trying to understand what happened in between. Does this mean that he spent a night in a prison cell? What does that also mean in terms of, the impact that has of him? But even just in preparing for his court appearance, I mean, it's scheduled for the 28th of August. And so if we were looking at the work that goes into behind the scenes during this time, preparation for a minor to face court, that obviously is also a major feat that has to be undergone. Tell us, what really happens. Give us a sense of what that mock court also looks like as we edge closer to that date.
So what's important is, and I think, you ask such an important question, what happened from the time the actual incident happened and the time that the child was released into the care or custody of his parents. Usually, they would not arrest the child and detain the child in a cell, but would look at a secure care facility where the child would be kept under constant supervision and monitoring, because the idea is again to prevent secondary victimization or trauma. And I think we need to understand that this is a 12-year-old, and we know that children continue to develop until the age of 25. The prefrontal cortex continues to develop, so the cognitive development continues until the age of 25. And one needs to also appreciate the level of anxiety and stress that this 12-year-old has been exposed to and subjected to, and the issue of survivor guilt, because he realizes and will continue to realize the impact of his, driving. And unfortunately, he's going to have to live with this. It's a fate worse than death, and living with post-traumatic stress disorder and high anxiety levels, which will impact on his trajectory forever. So I think, there's a huge challenge here, and that's why we speak about the Children's Act. We're looking at opportunities of how best to promote the child's interest, to ensure that the child also gets an opportunity to heal, and with the Child Justice Act, it's looking at relapse prevention, so addressing impulse control issues where he learns to restrain his impulses and managing those impulses, so avoiding risky situations and dangerous situations.
Yeah, and thank you for highlighting that, because we obviously just looking at the role of parents as well, from both ends. The ones who obviously lost, a child, but even just the accused. Talk to us about their role. But if we ascertain or entertain the worst case scenario, should this minor be found guilty by the court of law, what happens then?
Well, as I said, if we look at the risk indicators there, is this a once-off incident? Is it an isolated incident? Okay. So we need to be, it wasn't premeditated and orchestrated. Yes, stealing the car or taking the car certainly is unacceptable, it's unlawful, and there must be consequence management. But I think the consequence management is more from a therapeutic perspective. And yes, there's parents on both sides, and there's losses, major losses on the one side where they've lost their child forever, and obviously are going to hold this child accountable, but even this child's parents accountable. There isn't a quick fix solution here, and there are no definite answers.
Okay, well, we're obviously monitoring those developments rather closely, and just looking at the difficulties or the challenges that are going to be faced by their counselors and the prosecutors as well. But Dr. Shaheda Omar, thank you for your time at the SAWA and for weighing in. We obviously know that a 12-year-old has been charged with culpable homicide following a fatal joyful ride in Brakpan. Of course, one 14-year-old also passed away. So we're looking at how minors are also treated before the court of, in court, and really what, their rights in terms of protection, but it's also rehabilitation that comes to the fore in such a rare case as well. Again, thank you to Dr. Shaheda Omar from the TDB Clinic for weighing in.